Have you ever had an irresistible urge to do something that makes entirely no sense at all? Perhaps after locking the door, do you have to check it a dozen times? Maybe you can't go to sleep at night until you've unplugged every appliance in the house. Or perhaps you become overwhelmed with intrusive thoughts. These are just a few examples of what it's like living with obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. OCD is a neuropsychiatric illness. Neuro because it originates in the brain, and psychiatric because it affects feelings and behavior. This means OCD is biological, not caused by stress. However, stress is a very powerful trigger. While the neurobiology of OCD is still being sorted out, the current scientific evidence suggests that OCD stems from a communication problem between the three brain areas of the cortex, the striatum, and the thalamus. The corticostriatal-thalamic pathways are involved in both the initiation and the termination of behavior. Researchers believe that an imbalance between these pathways may cause individuals with OCD to get stuck in a repetitive loop of thoughts and behavior. To put it another way, OCD is much like a wiring problem within your brain circuit. Because selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors are quite successful in treating OCD, it has been hypothesized that serotonin may play a very important role in the disorder. Corticostriatal-thalamic pathways, however, also utilize dopamine quite heavily, so some have suggested that an imbalance between serotonin and dopamine levels may actually be at the root of this disorder. The challenge with OCD is that there is still so much to be learnt about this neurological disorder that they haven't even begun to scratch the surface. For example, an international team of researchers conducted 34 studies that examined the white matter tracts in the brain and how it might affect OCD. In all 34 studies, they discovered abnormalities in the white matter of OCD participants when compared to the non-OCD participants. These irregularities were most frequently seen in tracts that make up the corpus callosum and cingulum. The corpus callosum is a large fiber bundle that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain, while the cingulum is a group of fibers that connects different structures of the limbic system. So while some of the reported irregularities were related to the corticostriatal-thalamus pathways, the study also reported abnormalities beyond these pathways. While the implications of these findings are not yet clear, it does reinforce the general consensus that OCD is a disorder that results from faulty communications between multiple brain areas. Based on these findings, it would be fair to hypothesize that OCD expands beyond the corticostriatal-thalamus loop, which means there's still so much to discover about this brain disorder. What we do know, however, is that OCD impacts between 1 to 2% of the Canadian population. There is strong evidence of a genetic link, as researchers indicate a higher risk if you have a first-degree relative with OCD, especially if the OCD is developed during childhood. The specific genes associated with OCD have yet to be identified. Environmental factors also play an important role in OCD, as OCD may develop as a result of childhood trauma, and some children develop OCD symptoms following a strep infection. And while there is no cure for OCD, there are treatments to help manage the symptoms. This includes CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, which has been proven quite successful in mild to moderate cases of OCD. There are lots of programs and materials out there to help you with this. Other treatments include selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and antidepressants. Often CBT is combined with medications. There are also new surgical procedures to help with severe OCD, such as deep brain stimulation. Now, this is a procedure in which the surgeon implants electrical leads into specific parts of the brain. A neurostimulator then sends signals to regulate abnormal activity. Laser ablation is another option in which the surgeon makes a tiny hole in the skull, and with the help of an MRI, a laser beam creates a lesion a few millimeters wide to block the overactive circuits in the brain. However, before you consider something as drastic as brain surgery, it's important to know that OCD is often managed quite well with a combination of medication and CBT. And while OCD is difficult and challenging and some days downright exhausting, research also indicates that those with OCD often exhibit higher creativity, imagination, and usually have above average intelligence. Some of our greatest minds are suspected of having OCD, including Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla. OCD does not have to hold you back. If you learn how to harness it, you may even learn how to soar.